So this is class 104 on the Golden Doves. And I wanted to discuss the title of the next section, and you'll see in a moment why I want to do so. It's called Freedom, Language, and Negativity, right? What is it about freedom, language, negativity? And first of all, before we continue, I'm here in the Sea of Cortez, or next to the Sea. I'm not in the sea, but I'm next to the Sea of Cortez, and it's a little noisy because the surf is pretty intense. But so hopefully I will speak loudly, and hopefully you will all be able to hear me clearly. So what is the idea of freedom, language, and negativity? Really one of the essential points. There are so-called intellectuals, I consider them to be pseudo-intellectuals, who say that man has no free will. And they speak of that as a fact, as it's just proven. But of course you cannot prove that man doesn't have free will any more than you can prove that man has free will, right? So it's not provable. Let's say you have a thinker in Israel, his name is Yuval Harari. The World Economic Forum is in love with him. That nothing makes evil Gentiles happier than to see Jews supporting their nonsense and their pseudo philosophical notions, right? So, of course, when you have a professor from Israel who supports the idea that man has no free will, and he says how man eventually will turn into some sort of Borg, so the next evolutionary step in man, since we're just a series of algorithms and everything we do is just programmed, right? So, and by the way, why don't you believe in God? I mean, if you're saying that we're a series of algorithms and we're just basically programmed, so why do you reject the notion of creator, right? Perhaps the subtlety of that point may be too great for these intellectuals to to appreciate. But nevertheless, it doesn't matter. They say that man has no free will. We're a series of algorithms. Eventually, the next evolutionary step, which is around the corner, is they will implant chips into our brain, and then there will be a transformation from the same way there was a transformation from monkey to man, right? One day the monkey decided to stop eating bananas and decided to build universities, and they became man. There will be a transformation of man to Borg, so we'll become like these machines. Fair enough. So that's their opinion, and more than ridicule the opinion as I've been doing, I want to point out that yes, we can't prove that there is free will. We can't prove that there is no free will. Okay? But there is something there. Freedom, language, and negativity. Let's talk about language. Because language has to do with freedom or free will. The essence of language is choice. Okay, so here it is. You have the golden apple, right? You have the thought, you're thinking, you're not talking to anybody, you have a particular thought, you have a concern, you have an emotion. I'm looking at the ocean, wow, like I'm amazed at the beauty of Hashem's world. So that's a particular thought, but it's in my mind. I didn't articulate that thought, so that's a tapuchei zahav, right? But then I want to share that thought with somebody else. So in order to share that thought with somebody else, I had to transform the thought into language, right? So that's the silver dots. So the silver dots is an imperfect rendition or an imperfect iteration of the golden doves, right? So I speak the words, right? So I speak the words. I'm going to tell you, wow, I just saw an amazing birds flying around. I think it was a Commodore, and I'm looking at the bird, and the way the wings are designed is just unbelievable, right? So I just articulated a particular thought that I had in my mind. So the transformation from thought to speech, how does that take place? So I can say the condor is an incredible, or Commodore, I think it was a Commodore. I say the Commodore is an incredible bird. I can say the Commodore is an amazing bird. I can say the Commodore is an unbelievable bird. I can say that the Commodore is a remarkable avian creature, right? There's so many different ways I can say the same idea, right? Because language is arbitrary, meaning there's nothing compelling me to choose to use the particular words I use, right? And as we said in the study of linguistics, the relationship between the signifier and the signified, between the word and the object, is an arbitrary relationship, correct? So for example, I can say apple to describe the apple. I speak English. Okay, so I'll say apple. It's arbitrary. I could say tapuach, right? Tapuach in Hebrew is, apple. I mean, that's what they decided in modern Israel, right? Modern Hebrew. I'm not sure why they called the apple in biblical days, right? So, but probably tapuach. Yeah, tapuchez zahav b'maskiot kasef. Okay, so it's there. So it's the same word. Okay, interesting. So, when I articulate the golden apples into the silver mesh, it's always going to be a question of choice, right? I have complete freedom. I have the freedom of what words to choose. Okay, let's say I only speak one language. Fair enough, so I speak one language. The language itself, the words are arbitrary, but let's say I only speak one language. So I have the choice what words to use, how to articulate the thought, what parts of the thought to articulate, right? Or not to articulate, just to keep it to myself. It's always a choice, meaning speech is the greatest faculty of freedom. The fact meaning without freedom there cannot be speech. Because unlike mathematics, where the only way to express the relationship between energy and mass in a precise and correct way is to say E equals mc squared, right? That's not arbitrary. E equals mc squared. If I said, E equals mc cubed or some other, thing, it wouldn't work. But in language, there's an arbitrariness that requires freedom. So the very essence of man and what distinguishes man from every other life form is that we have these golden apples, which we transform into a silver mesh, and we communicate our thoughts as first person, we communicate it to a second person, and that's where freedom of choice exists. If you reject freedom of choice, you reject the very essence of man. And the very essence of man is our ability to communicate. You remember what we said? God made him with a living soul. And you remember what we said? What is the essence of that life? He can speak. Now you understand the relationship between speech and freedom, or between speech and free will. Because we have free will, we can take a completely arbitrary set of sounds and string them together in a particular way and decide that tapuach, which centuries ago meant apple, will continue to mean apple, right? Or we can take something like orange and give it a new name. So tapuz, for example, is actually in modern Hebrew, but it wasn't in biblical Hebrew as well, right? We can choose how to use language, how to speak, what to speak, when to speak, if to speak, and if not to speak. That is the essence of man, and I think this is the greatest proof, to the extent that there is a proof, against all these pseudo-intellectuals, be them Yuval Harari, and all the others who try to transform man into some sort of Borg, into some sort of machine. They do this, by the way, and I'll just say one more thing, because ultimately they want to enslave man, meaning the reason the World Economic Forum and all the global elite, they love this ideas of Yuval Harari and others like him, is because they want to enslave man. They want man to lose his choice. They want man to be beholden to their whims, right? But of course the Torah rejects that, right? Because the Torah is predicated upon freedom, Pairut. So we did freedom, language, but we didn't do negativity yet. That will be for a future class.